Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I've got 3 or 4 projects that I'm working on here. But a lot of times when I'm working on a project that's not necessarily a project video, I think about questions that people have asked me, the answers to them, and then a lot of times I'm trying to remember those. Maybe I should make more notes. I know some people probably write a script for their show. I don't do that. Sometimes that's obvious. But where I was going with that is I thought maybe today as I'm working in the shop, I'll take a moment at different points and I'll record a couple of answers to these questions as I come up with the answer to that. And and it's come up several times. I've had people ask about how I store my hardware and tools and different things like that. And I think you really have to find what works for you in your situation. What I mean by that is my shop, as many of you know, I moved my complete shop. I'm a snowbird, and in about 4 more weeks, I'll be packing up everything and moving it again. And so what works for me may not work for you, but I'd be happy to share what I've been using and then also some changes that I've got coming. So let me show you here real quickly here. Let me get a little bit more contact adhesive on here, and then I'll be right back to you. As I'm putting this on here, I thought I'm going to elaborate a little bit on one of my comments when I said what works for me may not work for you, or it may work for you. My materials, I feel like, need to be really fairly portable to make it easy for what I do throughout the year. That's moving from location to location. But for some of you folks, your hobby is maybe pulled out and set up on the kitchen table and worked on. So, maybe some of those things do work for you. And then, another thing is the size of them. I've had a few people ask me about, different sewing machines and such. And I think if I had a shop that I didn't move all the time, that maybe I would have other pieces of equipment. But I do try to limit myself to what fits in the trailer I have. And someone's like, well, go buy another trailer. I could do that. But once again, it's for that reason. The other thing is, I'll show you here how I organize my hardware. And it's worked really well for me. And it's easy for me to find what I'm going to use. And so this might be a good option for you. So let me finish this and then I'll be right with you. So one of the things, and I know you guys see it a lot in the backdrop, is the tool rack. And I made this from some, I think they were 5x6 posts, or maybe they were 6x6, and I cut them a little bit shorter there. But I use these to hold my tools, and I like the fact that they're a smaller unit. I can put that into another box. But if I was mobile, then I would probably have a different design one. And I'm thinking about remaking these so that they better fit the tubs that I put it in, and try to give myself a little bit more room. Sometimes I like the fact that I group together, like these are the same bar grounders here. This is a Buried King, and I think it's a 35, size 35. But I have them grouped together. So in some ways it's nice it's that way. But, I think it would be better maybe if I had a smaller hole and a tool per hole. I get caught up in that because then when you get back in here on like this guy here for Buried King, I mean, that's a huge handle on that tool. And if I made the smaller holes, then it wouldn't work, and it's hard to organize. So that's just an example of what works for me. And if I said this is how you should do it, maybe it doesn't work for you. But let me get over here on a different item. So here's a question I get pretty regularly, actually. How do I organize my supplies? And for me, supplies are like thread, and it's just in a simple tub over there. And I've thought about making a rack, but then once again, the portability, I just put it in a tub, and when I need to move, I just pick that tub up and away we go with it. But when I first started, I just had a box with Ziploc bags in it, and I'm digging through it. And there's probably some of you out there that are doing that. And if you don't have a whole lot of hardware, then that probably works pretty well for you. But it came up a couple of questions when I recently bought that grab bag mystery box stuff from the Buckle guy sorry, that was Weaver, and I've now sorted that with the help of HR manager into bags by color and such. So I think it'll help me utilize that. But when you if you don't have a way to organize it, I think it gets challenging to find things. So I started off with these two here, buckles and fasteners. Label on the handle what's in it. I can put these on a shelf or in a cabinet, and it's easy for me when I get ready to, use one of those categories just to grab that, get it out on the workbench, and then I've got tubs here, and I'll show you that in there. So I started off with those two, quickly added miscellaneous, and then as I've bought more hardware, then I end up, I've ended up growing in the number of boxes. And I don't think I need any more boxes than what I've got here. I ended up with this small deal here for some of my small rivets that I call spots, because I'm really just using them as decorative. But I've got them in here, and I purchased a couple more to maybe do it by color, so that I'm not, going through and trying to figure out which one. I can grab it. No, everything in there is the antique brass. Let me get you a closer look here. So in here, this is I have an ornate buckles, and like I have the Laramie sets in here. And it helps me whenever I get ready to place an order. I recently placed an order, and I'm looking for items so that I have a minimum order and get free shipping. If I need something from, say, Tandy, and I need to do that, then I can open up in here, and really quickly I can see I've got 4 sets of 1.25 inches, and I've got, I'm getting a little bit low, I have 3 sets of 1.5 inches, and I've got plenty of 1 inch. Otherwise, it leaves me, I think, sometimes guessing or digging through, and then you find it's in a different Ziploc bag. So I found that this really helps me to stay organized with that. Move that one out of the way. And another example would be in fasteners. This is the majority of this is Chicago screws. So I've got nickel plated, matte nickel. And so I think you get the point. And then these tubs, I've actually got some that have more bigger ones in them. I've borrowed from the other. And if I want to reorganize this, if I want to go with all nickel, then I can move those over there. And these aren't cheap. I mean, they're not terribly expensive. I think they're pretty well made. I think they're like, when I started, I was buying them for $20. I think they're like $26 a piece now. But it helps me be portable. So one way I think this can help is if you're setting up in a booth and you have ready-made items you're going to just sell across the counter, not take orders on. I've taken this with me before when I've thought I was going to sell quite a few dog collars or some of my ready-made belts, and I bring along my buckles, fasteners, and maybe my ornate buckles, so that if someone's like, well, I really like that, hey, can you put a fancier buckle on it, then I can just grab those underneath the table, quickly do what I need to do there. So I think that helps as well. So, do you need a big cabinet? I've looked at some of those, and the quality ones are really quite expensive. And I think these, my older ones I've had now for about 4 years, so they're holding up very well. So I'm just putting this belt together here. It's going to be dyed in dark brown. And this belt is for Bryce. And now I know I'm saying that like, well, you know who Bryce is, but he might be watching, so I thought I'd mention that. But I use the barge adhesive on here, and I've got 3 different tubs of adhesive going, the Weldwood and the Masters. The barge is getting thicker faster than the others, and I've just been rotating through. Whichever one I grab is based off of the volume in there. Been kind of keeping them and working them down the same here. So I think I've got, I've probably got enough to last another month before I start running empty on those. But the barge seemed to have gotten thicker. And the one thing that I didn't have as a control is I don't know, when each one of them were manufactured. Were they older to begin with? But I opened them at the same time and poured them in the containers at the same time. And I've not added anything to them, solvents or such. One of the questions I get pretty regularly is, how much inventory should I create? How many wallets do I need? What kind of colors do I need? Belts and such. And I'm not sure that I can really answer that. I don't know how many you need in your market. I'm not sure what your market is. I do know that, different markets are different. In other words, you know, what you're going to have in inventory in Colorado here where I'm at, as opposed to say Texas or in you know, New York State, it's going to vary some. So I think you have to kind of feel your way into that. And I caution you to putting a bunch of money into inventory, you know, trying to guess what everybody's going to want. I think it's better if you're able to work your way in either with experience there. But I'll tell you that when I've made belts before and I end up making, say, black belts, then I won't sell any black belts. I need brown ones. And then at a later time, someone wants the black belts. So it's really, I think it's a big gamble to start building inventory. I have a lot of inventory. I have less than I had when I started the summer out. I did sell quite a few of my belts out of my inventory, but I've still got probably around 55 belts on hand in my inventory, and that's a lot of money to have tied up in it. I've already come to the conclusion and made peace with the fact that if one day I stop making leather items, and I mean, it's going to happen to everybody eventually, right? One way or another, we end up stop making those items. I've already come to the conclusion that I'm going to have inventory left over. So how much inventory can you afford to have on hand? You know, the belts, by the time I get materials in them, I think I've said my average belt, I've got like $43 in there. So if I just go with the cost, not my time or anything else in there, you know, $43 times 50, what's that, like $2,200 in cost of materials. Oh, by the way, I get questions all the time. This is a BHT punch. I've been told that that's a Amish company out of New York, and I purchased mine from LitleLeather out of Indianapolis. And then, you know, this one here is a CS Osborne here. And these are my Ron's tools. This is a number 3 edger here. And when I made that first cut, it seemed a little bit coarse, so I thought I'd give it a little bit of a touch up here. Quite a bit better. I get questions pretty often about how do I keep my orders straight and my record keeping in that area. And I'll show you here. Here's the order form that I've been using. I know I've showed it quite a few times, but I would tell you that if you're a bag maker, then you would just change these categories. And this is the right size to where I just print it out on a printer here at the house, and then we cut it into quarters. So it's a quarter of a standard sheet, and I print it on a heavier bond paper. So it's like a cardstock. So it's like 4 times as thick as like regular paper is. But this helps me to keep track of it. And then when I'm finished with the order and I've shipped it, then I just put it into a card box here. And I've got everybody right here. So if someone calls and says, I need another belt, the last one was a dark brown, do you have something lighter? I'm not trying to, with their help, figure out what color their, dark brown is. I can pull it out and I can see what it is. And I think I mentioned it not long ago, but I've started, when I finish the belt and come up with the actual thickness, because this gentleman wanted, a 12 ounce or really close to a 12 ounce belt, then I'll actually measure it here, and I'll measure it in a couple places. Let's see where we're at there. Just slightly less than 12. And it'll probably vary a little bit there. 11 3/4 ounce there. And then my bend. Some people want to know what the bend is there. I'm 8 there and tapered down to a little under 6 at the tip of this bend over. Today's color is Phoebe's dark brown in the Pro dye. I buy all my dyes in quarts, and I typically dip dye. And I know I use more dye as a result of that. I get enough in here to make sure I get it easily submerged as I pull it through there. But I know I use more dye as a result of that. But there's a couple reasons why. One is, if you notice, I haven't created the holes yet in this. And what I find is that when I don't dip dye, that I really need to create the holes first, because the raw leather shows through pretty readily if I don't do that. And this gets deep enough into the leather to where it fixes that issue for me. And this is for my keeper. It's from the same leather. And once I dip dye it, I look at it and see if I have any, runs in it. Occasionally there'll be a spot in there, and if I feel like I need to, then I'll just take and run some extra dye on here to help even that out. I've been told, I don't have no proof whether it's true or not, that the Herman oak doesn't get that drip line on there. In other words, it dyes evenly. I guess that's another test for me to complete that I haven't done. Let me get this hung up here. I will say there are times when I wipe the dye on, depending on what the project is. Another one of those, it depends. And yeah, I know a funnel would probably be safer. I don't want to jinx myself. Let me finish here. I usually have pretty good luck of getting it, back in there. And there's obviously some clingage left in here that didn't get out of the container. And I use cardboard on the bench top to try to keep from having dye ending up on the countertop and picking it up on another project. And this summer I had 2 or 3 projects in a row where I had issues with that, and I realized that my cardboard was getting tired, and I'd used both sides, and I think I was transferring it that way. So I recently threw most of that cardboard out to start over. So actually, there's another thing I want to talk about here. So these order forms help in a couple of ways. One, I can quickly look and see orders that I need to make for people, and I'm able to, I think, pretty accurately figure out how long it would take before I make a project. So, if someone calls today and says, I need a belt, and I fill out the order form and I stick it in here, behind the other orders, I'm able to look through here, and this order here from Kevin, he's got actually quite a bit going on here. A belt, a tool pouch, and he said he wanted a DOP kit. So I'm able to go through here and say, well, that's going to take me a couple days, probably 3 days to do all of that. And, there'll be some other stuff in with it, a gunsling. So I can go through here and determine, how far out I would be, at this point, probably 2 weeks on that. There's like 6 in the back here that are partially filled out orders. In other words, someone says, I think I want a belt, but I'm not exactly sure yet. And I'm like, while you're in front of me, let me get your size. And so I know what size belt this person needs when the time comes. But I wanted to talk about something. So September, I'm here towards the end of September. You'll probably see this video the middle of the last full week of September. Anyway, somewhere in there, that's where you'll see that video. And what I want to talk about is we've got the holidays coming up. So I've already got enough work here to get me into, I'm going to say like the 8th of September. And then I'm going to have, Christmas coming around the corner. So I think it's good if you are anticipating orders for the holidays is to, and if you do any type of communication out to your customers, it's not too early to send out communication saying, hey, if you're thinking about items for the holidays, it'd be good to kind of get your name on my list of people. And if somebody said, yeah, I need a belt for, my son, don't know exactly the size, I'll probably go ahead and write it down so that if we get further down the road here and I don't hear from that person, I can reach out and say, hey, did you end up deciding on getting a belt for your son? But really the point I want to make here is it can take the fun of the holidays for yourself away if you are overcommitted for items. So you want to leave time there for the family and that, any travel plans that you've got like that. Last thing you want to do is get invited to something for the holidays that you want to attend and then feel like I can't because I've made these commitments. So typically my last cutoff, I'll tell people the middle of November, if I'm not already filled up by then, that if you want something for the holidays, I need to know, within the next week or 10 days. And sometimes that helps people make decisions. And the other is, I think they see you as professional, let them know up ahead of time. It could be that you talked to them in July, they talked about something for the holidays, and then when you get to like the 10th of December, they send a note like, hey, I'm getting back with you on that thing we talked about for the holidays. And you're like, do I tell them no? Probably not. At least I have a hard time with that word, no. But you end up getting overcommitted and being stressed. And I think it's also wise to leave some space in there. When I get into November, December, I'm probably only going to plan out, 4 days a week of work in the shop so that, well, one, if I have some challenges come up, I get sick or whatever, I don't completely throw my schedule out of whack there. Someone's probably going to say, I thought you were looking at changing stitching chisels, and I am. I wouldn't mind making a change to the chisels that I use. I've had these. I need to look up the receipt. More than 3 years. I've made hundreds of belts with them. I mentioned this summer that I was looking at changing. I'd like to find something that maybe the removal was a little bit easier. I mean, this works for me. And I don't have to have the most expensive tool. I don't have a problem investing in tools. If I found one set that I liked, I would buy it. I wish there was somewhere I could try some, and I guess I could reach out to a couple suppliers and ask them about, doing a review and looking at them. But most of the ones I've looked at, they are more refined, not as clunky as this. Well, an example of that would be this set here from Maker's Leather Supply. The thickness of the tines this way, these are probably somewhere around 60 to 75% of the thickness. They're more refined, they're polished more, and they actually do remove a little bit easier. So then you're like, well, why aren't you using those? Well, the reason why is because my style of stitching, where I have 2 needles through the hole at one time, the thickness of this hole fits better with the 2 needles. So when I've used the Maker's Leather Supply ones, they've worked fine, and I could use them on this belt, but the thicker the belt gets, the even harder it is to get both needles through there. And maybe this winter I'll re-examine my method of stitching and maybe modify it, but I don't know. In my mind, I hear somebody saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think my stitching looks good, and I don't get complaints on it. I don't know. I got to think on it, but that's the reason why I'm still using this set. Let me finish this up, and then I'll come back in a minute, and we'll talk about something else. These sponges, I think, are called tack sponges. In other words, horse tack. I buy them usually at like a farm supply or tractor supply. They may have them at Phoebe's. And I would say that when you first put it on, if you've got any streaks, you need to keep working on it to get rid of those streaks. If it's got a little bit of modeling from one area to the other, in other words, darker, absorb more, most of that, it seems like it goes away. But if you leave any streaks in your clear finish, it's going to be there, and it's not going to go away on progressive coats on it. So I do spend quite a bit of time working at to make sure that that's not there, visible. And I'll get the edges here as well. I'll put at least one more coat on all of it, especially these edges. A lot of times I won't put the clear finish on if it's going to be a similar colored thread. But I felt like putting it on today here before I put the thread on. It actually makes it a little bit easier to stitch on it as well. Let me hang this up over here. I hope you've enjoyed following along today. I've got a couple of other videos coming up that I think might be of interest, especially to leather crafters. I worry sometimes about doing simple projects. You know, how much of interest is that to the heart or the base of my viewers? So hopefully you enjoyed today's topic there. Give me some comments. A thumbs up would be appreciated, and let me know if you like this type of content. But I've got a bunch of projects going on, and you probably saw some costume change there a little bit as I went along. But I've got another project over here I'm working on that's in the category of probably need to learn how to say no. It'll be fun, and I'll get her done, and I think the people will appreciate it because it was a repair project that no one wanted to take on. So anyway, back to today's topic. I hope you enjoyed being here. I'll just go ahead and wrap up there. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I do hope you have a great day.